I hope the video is now on. Thank you, Jaro, for this introduction. I think those visuals really nicely show this customizable feature that we want to introduce in the next cycle. Okay, so let me now turn to our panelists, in particular, starting with Jack Radish from OECD. Jack, from the OECD standpoint, you've been doing peer reviews for a number of years and globally, really worldwide. Two questions. First is, what can a country expect to gain for a peer review? And if you can summarize one or two key lessons learned that from doing this worldwide. Over to you, Jack.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. I hope you could hear the questions.
Yes, I heard the first question. The first question about the lessons and the benefits. Thanks a lot for inviting me to speak today. I'm always happy to speak about the benefits of peer reviews and the great work that DG ECHO has been leading over the past years. It's just been a great relationship with DG ECHO and the OECD, and really happy to participate in the process and to see it go forward. I want to congratulate DG ECHO on organizing the possibility of peer reviews in the context of the UCPM. This is really showing leadership and stewardship at the European level for federating efforts across the civil protection community to continuously improve. So congratulations to DG ECHO in really taking this forward into a new round. I really want to encourage all of the members on the meeting call today to consider joining this next round. And in support of that, I'd like to recount some of my own experiences, encouraging you to participate in reflecting on some of these benefits that I've seen throughout the years. And there are many benefits, but three that I really want to talk to you about today to focus on. The first is what the peers bring to the peer review, which is objective feedback from your colleagues in the form of analysis on what is working well in managing disaster risks and where there are areas for improvement. They provide you really fine-tuned recommendations about what to do about these areas for improvement based on their own experience and specifying the tools and the practices from their country that has been useful to address these common challenges that you all face. Now, some of this advice that they provide might already be known to some or all of the stakeholders who participate in the peer review. But what I notice is that oftentimes the stakeholders in a civil protection system, they're very well informed about their profession. They understand better than most anyone in the country what the risks are facing it. But they might not have their voice heard by the people who need to hear it or be able to mobilize through their own means and internal channels the expertise about what kind of changes are needed. And having outside recognition of these challenges or areas for improvement can really help to gain attention and political traction. So in my experience, I've seen the peer reviews lead to concrete changes in disaster risk management institutional structures and policies in disaster risk reduction investment. So, for example, whether it was creation of a country risk officer in the office of the Prime Minister in order to really strengthen a coordination capability across government, or the decision to approve investment of over 400 million euros in a retention dam based on our economic analysis at the OECD of how it could improve flood risk management. The OECD peer review process has had concrete results, and I'm sure that these DG ECHO peer reviews as well, especially when there's a follow-up process put in place to accompany the countries in acting on the recommendations. A second type of benefit, turning it around, I first talked about what the peers bring to the table, but secondly, there's a benefit in what the coordinating organization and the stakeholders involved get out of the entire process. And that is increased knowledge and understanding of the many actors whose responsibilities interact with their own goal of managing disaster risks. I think the process can reinforce and improve those relationships but at the very least, it gives the stakeholder organizations the opportunity to better understand one another. We shouldn't ignore the fact that interagency coordination and interinstitutional relations are sometimes less than perfect. And there may be rivalries or jealousies. There may be funding shortages that keep an organization from performing to the level of expectation that other organizations in the disaster risk management system have of it. And these are not formal aspects of the peer review. They're not written about in the report, but the feedback that I have consistently received from countries over the years is that the points of contact that they develop across government, the scientific community, the private sector, civil society, has really improved their organization's ability to cooperate and coordinate after the peer review. And to finish, a third type of benefit is what the peers themselves take away from the experience in terms of learning and reinforcing relationships with their colleagues in the country under review. This is very important, it seems, for the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. Many of your organizations are eventually going to be called upon to work together in future in an operational context of solidarity. And you're certainly going to be called upon to work with each other in a planning context. So for civil protection professionals to see with their own eyes the disaster risk management capabilities and other members should really improve their ability to cooperate both at the operational and planning levels eventually. Over.
Thanking Jack for these examples that he brought into the discussion, and I think we have a very nice follow-up to those comments. Going to Carlos, who represents a country that recently did a peer review. So I would be interested in asking Carlos if you could summarize a bit the experience. How did it go? How did it work? The opportunities that it brought, but also the challenges. And from your point of view, what can a country expect from such an exercise in terms of results? Over to you, Carlos.
Good morning again, Gaetano. Good morning to everybody. Not sure if you can see me. At least I get the information that my video cannot connect. Jack already answered part of the question that you have just mentioned, Gaetano. We went into our peer review just 1 year ago, so it was it's still fresh in our mind at this moment. It's still fresh in our memory, and this is a great opportunity also to share our experience with this exercise. The main point that Jack already mentioned is that it's important what you give, and it's important also what you get. I mean, it's a win-win process for the peers, for the host country, also for the Commission, for the OECD, for all the involved people in the process. But at the same time, it's a challenging process. In our situation, first of all, let me explain why did we decide to go for a peer review. Basically, we had two reasons. The first was that after the major fires in 2017, Portugal went into a deep reform on our civil protection system. And this, of course, led us to the need to know more and to get this assessment from other experienced countries in terms of the way we were doing in this changing process. And the second reason why we went to a peer review was because we were about to start the process of reviewing our national prevention strategy, and so any feedback, any additional input was valuable for us. So it was the right timing to ask for a peer review so that we can get more an in-depth analysis of our system. But then there come these two challenges. The first one was that we had decided to go for a comprehensive overview, so focus on the different aspects of the risk management cycle. So this this led to the need to involve more stakeholders than we expected at the beginning. Roughly, we had about 50 different stakeholders from different areas, from prevention, preparedness, recovery, etc. And this implied that we had to draw a quite comprehensive agenda for the mission of the peers in Portugal, to balance between meetings and field trips, so that we can provide the most suitable overview of the different aspects of the risk management cycle in Portugal. So this was one of the challenges, to have a comprehensive agenda, comprehensive program, so that the overview and the assessment could be made in a very smooth way. The second challenge was a particular one. We had this peer review process in 2019, the same year where Portugal was organizing the international civil protection exercise, the Cascade 19. So as host country of the exercise, and at the same time as host country of the peer review, our team was fully involved in the preparation, in the planning. So we had to prepare both things at the same time. This might look a bit like a nightmare, but at the end, everything ran well, everything ran smoothly. We really enjoyed and profited from our time with the peers. And trust me, nobody, everybody survived. Nobody got injured while trying to move from exercise planning to peer review planning. So it was quite a good experience. Also, not only for us as Civil Protection Authority, but also for the stakeholders. In fact, all the stakeholders that we contacted to join the peer review process, they accepted. Nobody refused to participate in the peer review. And actually, when they were involved in the process, they participate in a very active manner, and they also benefited from the feedback that the peers got delivered in the final report. So this was something that we clearly have gained with the peer review. It brought us closer to our partners, to our national stakeholders. It reinforced our civil protection network with agencies leading efforts in terms of prevention dedicated to other risks, and with the local authorities, the regional ones. Even today, when we have some new topics on the agenda and we have to discuss new issues, to have some problems to solve, we usually say, look, let's talk with our peer review contact point, because with the network that we have built for the peer review process, we have gained a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of direct contact with the right person in different stakeholders. So this illustrates a bit how much we have gained with the process. And of course, Jacques already mentioned, it's the importance and the relevance of what the peers bring to the table. We have gained a lot of experience, a lot of expertise with our peers. Some of them are also with us today here in this webinar. So I always thank them for the valuable input that they have given to us. We not only received an independent and cost-free assessment of our system, but we also received a lot of direct knowledge from emergency managers from other member states. They helped us to stop and look to our achievements, look to our constraints, to identify our good practices, but they were also very constructive in pointing out some ideas for the future improvement of our system. And it worked both ways. Sometimes the peers ask us more information on specific projects that we have in Portugal, because they would like to implement it, also that project in their own countries. I mean, this was really grateful for us to know and to see that our experience, our practices, our projects are also valuable to other countries, in fact, to the countries where the peers were belonging. So this shows, as I mentioned before, that it was a win-win process for the peers, for the stakeholders, for the national authority, for the Commission, for the OECD. Everybody was happy with the result. It's not just a question of thinking that a country is under evaluation. It's not that at all. It's a question of sharing, of mutual understanding, and of bringing us together with our national partners and also with your international partners. Back to you, Gaetano.
Thank you, Carlos, for this. I like that you started with a point which for me is critical. Why did we do this? It was the first thing you said, and I think it reminded me that it was also one of the main points in this workshop we had in January, is that when a country knows, why the peer review is needed, what is the context, the questions that the country plans on to address with the peer review, it really makes it much easier for the objective of the peer review to be achieved. So really understanding why and put the exercise in that context, I think it's a critical question. So very good. I also would like to invite if there are peers or representatives of countries who have been reviewed in the past to come in with comments or questions. But let me now go to the UNDRR, Sebastien Penzini. UNDRR also is carrying out a similar program of peer review, although with a different focus. And perhaps Sebastien can talk to that. I was wondering a little bit, how, first of all, complementarity or linkages that you see with the Union Civil Protection Mechanism peer reviews, and also for you, as I asked Jack, what have you learned? If there's one or two things that you would like to share with us in terms of learning from, you work on an even broader region, geographical region than us, so it may be interesting for us to hear on what you learned from this program. Over to you, Sebastien.
Thank you very much, Gaetano, and good afternoon. And first of all, thank you very much actually for this opportunity to do this webinar with you and to discuss about these very important mechanisms which are now in place for assessing the capacities and supporting member states. So first thing I would like to say is that UNDRR has regularly recognized actually the importance and the high value of the peer review as a critical mechanism for assessing the DRR governance structure and the capacities. And you already a bit described this framework. And what is important now, touching about your question, it is that in this overall DRM framework, the national strategy, as also Jaroslav underscored, is really a fundamental element which actually defines the long-term DRR vision, which identifies the national priorities based on hazards, vulnerabilities, exposures, etc., and which turns it into concrete and budgeted activities. So the strategy is really at the core of this overall system, as you called it, and it is finally an element which is important for securing the performance evaluation and monitoring the efforts made by national authorities in terms of disaster risk reduction. So in this context, which is underscored from the very beginning of the Sendai framework and actually concretized by its target E, we have developed this strategy assessment process, which actually contributes to evaluate the robustness of the strategic plans, to also assess the inclusion of the key recommendations of the Sendai framework, and this in different dimensions, about the structure, so how things are organized, about, of course, the substance, what are the priorities, what are the different activities and the elements addressed, and also about the coherence and the transparency, which are, as you can imagine, very important element. So very concretely, and as for the peer review, the strategy assessment process is in a more modest dimension, structured by a pool of experts coming from other national authorities, coming also from the scientific community, the private sector, also from regional development banks, and also the civil society. And this is exactly, I would say, the same approach and the same, I would say, willingness and the same wish to actually have this very large scope of expertise for being able to assess the components of disaster risk reduction at a national level. So now I would say in complementarity to the peer review mechanism, what I would say is that the strategy assessment process specifically dives actually in a deeper way into the main element of the national legal framework as called in the peer review. It is really focusing on the strategic planning, which can be a national DRR strategy or a slightly different document. It also assesses how the main DRR actors are involved actually in this strategic planning and how they are responsible for implementing the efforts, and also for completing the comprehensive DRM approach, which is analyzed by the peer review. The strategy assessment analyzes how the risk knowledge elements that are also part of the peer review mechanism are actually operationalized in the strategic planning, how they are used actually for defining the priorities, for defining the long-term vision, etc., etc. So there is really a kind of an articulation here. In concrete terms, the assessment process addresses around 80 indicators, which are covering all the key aspects of the strategy, from the use of risk knowledge to the coherence with the climate change adaptation, and also, for example, and for the current context, the inclusion of biological hazards and I would say the capacities put in public health. One also specific strength of the assessment process is a kind of a flexibility, which is also underscored in the peer review mechanism, and which allows actually to work on a draft plan, on an existing plan, on at any stage actually of the strategy development process, and then to be able to work with any member state working on this target E of the Sendai framework and working on the development of a strategy. And finally, another point which is also very important and that you also underscored previously, I believe it was Jaroslav, is the fact that for the strategy assessment process, it is demand driven, and this actually direction strengthens significantly the political endorsement of the exercise and its positive impact on the structural and long-term DRR progresses. And you were asking me about actually some example beyond the European Union, and we have a very concrete example which actually came back to us just yesterday, coming from Moldova, where actually we implemented the DRR strategy assessment process in December 2019, and based actually on a draft strategy from 2015, which was left because of many different reasons. We did this assessment, we released and provided this set of recommendations, and we remained in touch with the different actors. And we learned yesterday that now the development process of the strategy has been put back on track and is now really not considered, but implemented through the nomination of a drafting committee, through the nomination of experts and consultants who will work on that, and based actually on the draft document and our set of recommendations. So this, I would say, impact driven and demand driven mechanism is also, I believe, a very important aspect. So in two words, as called by the Sendai framework through the target E, and also confirmed by the assessment of the peer review, the national strategies, the strategic frameworks, and their action plans should be really at the core of the DRM structure, representing the legal mechanism for planning the risk reduction efforts on the longer term and ensuring the coherence among the different agendas with secured budgets. And therefore, having this opportunity, which is quite unique today, to cover the full DRM structure of a member state through the peer review mechanism and the DRR strategy assessment process, offers a very specific opportunity to recognize the existing capabilities and to build on it to support the authorities in identifying, as you said, the potential gaps, to orienting the priorities, and to facilitate the decision-making process at the national level. So these two different tools support both the implementation of the Sendai framework and also, I believe, the resilience goals promoted by the European Union. So that's more or less how the complementarity is built and is actually naturally found between the two systems. One very last point I would add to that, which is actually not least, is probably the critical need to also maintain the same kind of effort at local level, and also to considering the importance of the DRR work, which is undertaken by the local authorities and the mayor offices. And in this second dimension, second level, which is local, the tools we have, such as the city resilience scorecard and the project like the Making Cities Resilient campaign or the U-Score, have very specific values, which might be also, I would say, considered in complementarity and in addition to the tools we are discussing today. Thank you very much, and over to you. And of course, happy to take.
Thanks a lot, Sebastien. I hope you appreciated in the hexagon the approach that Jaro presented. That that legislative / policy / governance hexagon comes at the center, and I think we definitely look forward to collaborating with UNDRR.
Yes, it is definitely a critical point, which is at the very core of the new peer review framework, and I believe it is a very good, I would say, kind of improvements that we will definitely be keen to support with you in a short future. So yes, really happy for that.
I'm glad you appreciate that. Okay, and last but not least, let me go to Montse in Ispra. So is a key partner for us, for the DG ECO, and for the Commission DRM program in general. But in particular, we worked on the preparing guidelines document for the national risk assessment and the national disaster risk management capabilities assessment, which is, I just take the opportunity to remind everybody, some key aspects of our legislation, of the European legislation on civil protection. So, Montse, with looking at this documents and this policy processes, let's say, how do you see peer review contributing? How can a peer review help a country, prepare or for such exercises, which we know will take time, and also just, or at very least, collect ideas, take stock of best practices. Maybe you can give us some of your thoughts. Over.
Many thanks, Gaetano and colleagues, for having invited me to this panel and for this very good question indeed. I think it is very important in general to take some time to reflect on what we do, and in particular, as already said by you, Gaetano, to think on the why we decided that this was the good way to proceed, and to evaluate if the way we are implementing it, so the how, the first question, fits the purpose. To be concrete in this case and to answer your question, let's focus on the submission from participating states to the Commission of the summaries of the National Risk Assessment and the Risk Management Capability Assessment exercise, and on their link with the peer review process, because you were mentioning the guidelines offered by Commission to member states to do this process. You were asking about the strengths and weaknesses. Let's start from the positive part, so the strengths. And for that, I would like to remind you very briefly the why of the reporting exercise. It can be considered that it has two main goals that have been already mentioned by Carlos, indeed. So the first one is to support the development of a common understanding on risk, its drivers, interlinks, and options for reducing it. And the second one is to promote and facilitate this exchange of good practices and lessons learned, and to speed up the risk reduction process. Obviously, one could argue that the preparation of the National Risk Assessment and the Risk Management Capability Assessment report already allows fulfilling these two objectives, but this is at national level. By submitting the summaries to the Commission, and thanks to the overview of risks that you may face, the series of publications prepared by Commission on the top of them, the fulfillment of these two objectives is also eased at the European level. And I think that now more than ever before, we know that disasters has no risk, and that when one is suffering, all the rest of the planet suffer as well. So I've been involved in the three submissions, indeed, of the National Risk Assessment, and in the only one for the Risk Management Capability Assessment. And I've seen a very positive evolution on the quality of the National Risk Assessment. So I'm really glad to see that the four of the Commission and on the member states in this process focusing on the identification of the good practices to promote a mutual learning culture was really the right approach. Each country has very positive elements to share, as was already mentioned by Carlos, and at the same time, each country faces challenges and needs help, support, ideas, advice. This sharing exercise has been beneficial for everyone. Some remarkable elements on the evolution of the national risk assessment that we could highlight here are so that we have moved from the initial natural disaster focus to the current one, which is all hazards, all sectors approach. The time frame of the assessments has been shifted from the initial very short term that was more adequate for emergency response plans to the current medium and long term perspective, which is the more convenient for risk management planning. Climate change impact is now mentioned and considered in all national risk assessment that we received. And slowly but progressively, we can also see the evolution towards a more harmonized risk assessment process, looking for having the same metrics at the end of the risk assessment performed per each hazard. And thanks to the fact that now the link to the risk management phase is well present to all. Obviously, the peer review exercise is precious for this national risk assessment and reporting process because it could further, and it is doing it already, accelerate this positive trend of mutual learning as previously mentioned by other panelists. Let's move now to my favorite side, which is the weaknesses, because for me, this is the part of opportunities for improvement, challenges, and as a scientist, so this is my domain. Trying to follow a bit the structure of the different phases involved that Jaroslav presented, we could say that for the national risk assessment perspective, the harmonization process for risk assessment will need further refinements, so further work, and the publications of the Commission that you mentioned before are aiming at helping on that. Another area of improvement could be to better link risk assessment and risk management planning processes. In some cases, we detected that were run by two different communities and not profiting too much from the two processes. A stronger governance, linking local, that was mentioned just before by Sebastien, linking the local, the regional, and the national authorities in the risk assessment process is a must. But I know this is another well-known aspect that many countries are already addressing with the support of different institutions, and there are many also opportunities to work on that together. Maybe the most evident element for further work will be to do a collective effort to understand that identification of gaps and needs for improvement is the first step towards a more resilient future. We have this natural tendency to avoid declaring where we could need support and to identify our weaknesses. But this is a key element to make progress. So we need to do this effort to move forward on that. It is not necessary to say that the peer review exercise is smooth and supports the adoption of this required open approach. The offer made by a country to open the doors to other peers to come and discuss, supervise, ask, advise, compare situations is a demonstration of trust in the European Union principles, values, and is a gift for everyone, as already mentioned as well by Carlos. So the hosting country, but also the ones performing and receiving the conclusions from the exercise are beneficiaries of this effort. I think I will stop here because I would like to have the time for interaction with the participants. Over to you, Gaetano, and thank you again for having invited me.
Thank you, Montse. Very nice conclusion to this first round. Let me go to Jaro to see if we have already questions or comments from participants.
Thank you, Gaetano. Yes, we have one question. And if you want me, I could, you know, unmute the participant to permit him or her to ask the question directly. So what do you prefer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I've invited Naher. I'm not sure whether I'm pronouncing the surname correctly. Kuchinai, let you to come and ask the question.
Yeah. Am I online?
Yes, you are. We can hear you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jaroslav. My question was mostly on the period of time when the joint research center or consortia will be able to came or to be part of peer review process in Kosovo, because we has expressed our interest to invite or to be part of process. It was a first one question.
Okay, thank you, Nehat. So let me. That's a good question, because also it gives me the opportunity to clarify a little bit the process. You know, what happens after this meeting. So, as I said at the beginning, we are collecting expressions of interest. So we have this tentative deadline by the 15th of October to collect the expression of interest. So if you haven't done so, I would really ask your civil protection authority, national authority, to submit to us the request. It would be also good to elaborate a little bit on what are the reasons and what the objectives that you want to achieve with the peer review. We will try to give a response to confirm the possibility of doing a peer review. I would say during the month of November, approximately. Just for information, we have 4 slots available. So I want to make sure that this is also clear. We cannot, you know, the capacity, organizing a peer review, running a peer review, it takes time. So we cannot do, and we want to ensure high quality for this exercise. So we have 4 slots available until the February 2022. We will collect this expression of interest. We will assess which expression of interest are more is more mature. You know, there's more countries more ready to do such a peer review, and what are the objectives behind it, and then we will pick the country that will be which will be working in the next pretty much 14 months. So I hope that was clear. Let's see if there's anybody else who wants to ask questions from the floor, either in writing or by voice.
So let me perhaps just to repeat, is a possibility to ask the question using the question and answer facility of this webinar, and or to put the question directly in the chat.
Okay, from my side, thank you if you heard me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nat.
You're welcome. Okay, I hope that this means that we were clear, or not, hopefully not boring, but Jaro, you have the slide with our contacts and the website URL. Perhaps you could just...
Yes, I will put it on.
Okay. I take it that there's no question from the floor, so perhaps, well, just before closing, one last very brief round of comments from our panelists. One sentence, why a country should sign up for this, starting with Jack and following the same order.
Is my audio live?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see you and hear you.
One sentence, I'd say this is an opportunity for self-improvement, and it can be tailored to your country's main priority, thanks to the very nice work that Jaro and his team have done in revising the framework. And it's a process that draws on the knowledge and expertise of credible experts and peers whose own institutions and countries have an interest in effective disaster risk management in your country.
Very, very nice. That was short and sweet. Thank you, Jack. Carlos.
Well, once again, I will take stock on what Jack just mentioned. I mean, it's an opportunity. It's demanding, of course, it is demanding, but at the same time, it's worthwhile. It's an important and unique opportunity to assess your strengths, to assess your gaps. And as I said before, it's not a question of your country, your authority being under evaluation. It's a question of having an opportunity for sharing, for mutual exchange of information, to get useful expertise and useful knowledge, and to get some inputs to improve your system. I think that's the most important takeaway of the peer review process.
Thank you, Carlos. Sebastien, meanwhile, I've got two more questions, but which I will respond shortly after. Over to you, Sebastien.
Yeah, no, I would say that the risk landscape is really quickly evolving, and new risks are emerging, and recent pictures coming from Beirut, coming from San Francisco yesterday, even coming from Greece actually, underscore actually that we have to adapt, and we have to move to a more systemic approach of risk. And both the peer review mechanism and the DRR strategy assessment process are really at the core of the support that the European Union and the United Nations can offer to member states for actually following this path and adapting to the new risk. And really, it would have a very positive impact on strategic planning and adapting capacities to new risk. So there is no doubt for going through it. Over.
Thank you, Sebastien. Montserrat?
Yes, maybe I could use one of the Aristotle sentences, which is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, because it means that together we become stronger. Over to you, Gaetano.
That was a sentence to summarize it all. Thank you. Let me go to two questions, also very, very timely, I would say. From Salem on COVID-19 impact on the program. Very good, because I didn't mention it. We all aware of the impact of COVID-19 on the logistics of our projects, you know, especially those of us who are in the business of meeting, of advisory missions and peer reviews as well. We are therefore, we have a contingency plan because we are aware that the situation will probably extend over the next easily 6 months, so the restrictions, etc. So this means that together with the CMCC, our partners, and Plinius, we are planning for a remote series of meetings. So basically, to have at least the first part of the peer review, which I think Jaro has it in a slide, had it in a slide earlier, the data collection part, and you know the period during which peers get briefed on the countries, to have that virtual, so based on Zoom meetings, on you know, documents that are shared, and then try as much as possible, you know, hoping that the COVID and you know vaccine and will come up at least by the first 6 months of 2021, have at least the final opportunity to meet in person and to share the finding of the peer review. I think this is the plan that we're working with at the moment. Not ideal, but unfortunately, I think most of us, you know, I think also colleagues in the OECD and UN are experiencing the same. Everybody will. And then second question from Marin, the average time period of the peer review. So based on, I would say, the experience of this previous cycle, so we had 6 countries that went through the exercise in 2018, 2020. I guess I can say 6 months as an average. from, let's say, the very first, from the expression of interest and from the first meeting, let's say, with the country to understand well the needs of the countries to the handing out of the report. Again, it's an average, so there's just to give you an idea, it's about 6 months. Let's do one last check to see if there is any more questions or comments from the floor. Doesn't look like.
Gaetano?
Yes, Sebastien.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to share an example, as I saw that Mr. Petrov from Bulgaria is on this call and actually responding to the first question. I would give the example of what we have done in Bulgaria in the recent months, where actually we have been asked to run the DRR strategy assessment process, of course, under the COVID-19 situation. So we adapted the process to a complete remote, I would say, process for doing the strategy assessment. And I believe that the process went nevertheless very well, and we have been able to coordinate and to have very fruitful exchanges, both with the assessment committee and with the national authorities of Bulgaria. And we ended with a report which was, I hope, that in line with all expectations. So it means that it is possible, and as we have to adapt again to new risks and to new situations, I believe that both mechanisms will be able to adapt. So there is no worries about this topic. Over. Yeah, no, that's great, Sebastien. Glad also to have Bulgarian colleagues in the meeting, and good that you remember that you reminded of that practical experience. I think, I don't see any other question coming in, but do not worry, because both myself and my colleague Judith Sorensen, who I should have introduced earlier, she's co-managing with me this program. We are here to answer your questions. Anything you want to know, or if there was something that you didn't have the opportunity to ask, we have the email address in the slide that is now on the screen. So just feel free to approach us. Thanks again. The webinar will be also, the recording of this webinar will be on the website, on the page of peer reviews. Jaro, unless you want to add anything, I would just
thank you. No, just thank you very much for having participated in this webinar, and we are all looking forward to working with you.
Yeah, same here. I would like to thank the panelists, the partners in this program, OECD, UNDRR, the government of Portugal, and JRC.
Thank you for the invitation.
You're very welcome, and we look forward to receiving your expression of interest. Thank you, and have a good day and weekend.